Round one. Fight. Hadouken! Some of you may know what I just said there at the start of the show. And if any of you were a fan of old school computer games, yes, we are that old where we actually talk about old school computer games. Street Fighter, very famous game that's still around for young kids these days who do play games consoles. But back in the day, when you had a computer, you may have done the old Street Fighter, Ken versus Raul, etc., all that sort of stuff. Hadouken was the famous move, and whispers are coming out of the club, potentially surrounding the fact that David Moyes is entering into a street fight with Tim Steidten. Now, on the back of the journalist written post from Jacob Steinberg yesterday, I did do a show last night kind of highlighting over the comments, as did Russ this morning, giving you his kind of real thoughts on what he believes is going on. Now, there are whispers, and all these reports collectively coming in are starting to make you feel like there is a problem, with the situation between David Moyes and Tim Steiden. Now, what we do know is that we've saw them physically get on really well. I saw them at the European victory night dinner where I was at, and they were working together, talking together, really respectful of each other, really kind, nice, all that sort of stuff. What we do see pre-games is the two of them talking pitch side, etc., about whatever they talk about. We will never know what they do talk about, but you can't help but feel like there is potentially problems building up within the ranks at West Ham, and in particular because what I find quite interesting is some of the damning reports that are coming out right now. From Sky Sports, from The Athletic, from the Sun newspaper, whatever they are, don't really care. And now from The Guardian, specifically from the connection that is historically close to David Sullivan. And as Russ said in the show earlier on this morning, the collection of this information usually probably has been ran by David Sullivan and fact-checked by David Sullivan. Now, remember, please understand, everything we're reporting is based upon what is out there in the mainstream media. So we're not coming from a place of information that's brought to us. What I will say to you, though, is, and probably quite a lot of people who do the content that we do online, and, maybe people who are in the social media world, that we are fed some information from specific sources. Those sources choose to maybe make contact to these social sites. And at that point, we choose whether or not to bring those stories to you. So we've heard for several few months that there has potentially been issues at the club, but me and Russ felt like it was right to sometimes report the information. We try and fact check some of the information and don't tend to bring the news to you unless we think that there's some element of truth. And if we are going to bring it to you, then we'll try and fact check it. And therefore, even then, it doesn't mean that it is factual or true either. So we do take a back step from that kind of world. And regularly, we are informed through emails and other sources of information that is brought to us. Now, you may look at that and go, are we right to withhold that information? Well, we don't want to become or enter that world of ITK news. We don't want to bring you exclusives in terms of information that we don't know are facts. So this is why we choose to report the information that we've been given and or is out in the mainstream media. And this is the situation between the Moyes and Steiden. We're led to believe, and to be honest with you, whether you believe it or not, you can't help but think that there must be some element of truth behind it, because it's coming from specific sources, unless the man at the top, David Sullivan, is mixing the bowl. And, I don't know whose side he is on. And that's the confusion. And that leads on from Russ's show earlier on. I have no idea what side David Sullivan is on, because I don't know if he is the master of his own, problems, or thinks he really does know what he's talking about when it comes to West Ham, because we know he feeds information. They historically have done about this club through their whole tender of running our football club. And if they are mixing this up, then he has got a lot to answer for. And going back on Russ's point this morning, we do need to be delivered a clear message, because we've got Moyes, who's got 4 or 5 months left on his contract, and Tim Steidten hearing that he potentially could be looking to leave the club. Again, we don't know these facts, but we need to know the direction the club is going in. Now, if the club feel that they don't need to tell the fan base, but they have an answer, then I'm okay with that. But we need to know something. We need to speak out. This is where the board have always failed, in my eyes, at West Ham. They've never communicated. And if they ever have, it's always been at the wrong time, at the wrong place, and sends the wrong message. They don't have that element of communication skills with the fans. They have no connection to the fans whatsoever, except for the fact that they believe they've delivered something to us, which they have, or which the set of players and David Moyes has, in terms of giving us a European trophy. Something which I find really interesting about is the fact that, you know, a lot of West Ham fans I speak to have kind of came around the mindset that we've won that European trophy, so they're going to sit back and that's them happy now. And this whole situation at West Ham has driven them so insane that they couldn't care less what happens moving forward. There's a lot of fans I speak to that are starting to lose patience with the whole situation. Even the match day experience, when you go to the London Stadium and the vibes that you feel at the stadium, it still doesn't technically feel at home for a lot of fans. A lot of fans do like it, but a lot of fans equally don't like it. You've lost a lot of the fans who don't go back. Season ticket renewals are different because there's different fans going in. You don't have the atmosphere that was once generated once upon a time at Upton Park. Let's not forget, Upton Park sometimes wasn't great itself in terms of an atmosphere, but you knew you could get the place rocking. Equally, though, we know we can get the London Stadium rocking. And I think we need to have some guidance, some deliverable messages given to us to let us know, listen, there's a unified approach. And even if it means that David Moyes is leaving the club in the summer, I think what we need to know is there's a collective gathering of not panic behind the scenes, because the panic behind the scenes that we're hearing starts to dribble onto the pitch is what we're seeing, and we need that message to be delivered clear to us as fans. And that's the frustrating part. It's been like that since they've taken over this club. The messaging is so unclear, the guidance of where West Ham are moving forward. And again, I'll repeat myself as I do many a time. We can potentially be looking here at taking 3 steps forward and having 4 steps back, which is what I'm really concerned about. I can be acceptant of some of the decisions that are made if I know we've got a clear path for progression moving forward. But one thing I also am, I'm slightly impatient, but I'm willing to be patient, is if we do get a new boss in, that might take time. We can't expect results immediately. So there's an element of truth of what David Moyes says. You know what? He has consolidated. I get that. And even when you look back at his Everton time, when he consolidates at Everton, he then tries to make a push once you've consolidated. The concern, going back to Russ's video again, is we are and have spent a lot of money and bringing in quality. And you would think with that money that's spent, as much as I say, you know, West Ham have moved with the times, I look at our squad and it looks depleted. It looks older. We're on the average age well above what it should be, considering the message that he said when he first came back into the club. We want to bring the average age of the players down, and that has not happened. And you look at the squad now, 3 or 4 years later from when David Moyes came back to the club, and it does look depleted. It looks small, and you've got players that aren't getting game time. And the average age of players like Ogbonna, like Russ said, getting a new contract that really he shouldn't have been. Really, he shouldn't have been given that new contract. No disrespect to you, Oggy. I love you to bits. You've been a great servant to the club, even though I gave you a hard time at the start of your career at West Ham. But you shouldn't have been given that contract at West Ham. And now look at our centre-back options. We've got, you know, a depleted Zuma, a kind of no legs Ogbonna. We've got Mavropanos and a Gerd, and there's no clear direction of what we're doing moving forward. We know David Moyes wants 4 central defenders, but you feel like we've only really got 2, to be honest with you, and we don't really know if there's a partnership to be struck up there. We're still reliant on potentially putting Aaron Creswell, who was tipped to leave the club last summer, on the park for game time. Again, respect you for what you've done for the club, but there's a time and a place, and you need to move on. And we're becoming reliant on the 34-year-old Mickey Antonio, whom I still think he's got a place in the squad, being the backup guy, not the main guy. And the situation is we're reliant on him again. And that is where the problem lies. And if Tim Steidten is going to try and build what we do know he can build, then he needs to be given full reign at that. And that, unfortunately, leads to David Moyes leaving the club. There is, as Russ said, probably a decision should have been made back in the summer. The opportunity was back in the summer. But typical West Ham, we don't take those opportunities, and we, don't separate in good terms, and eventually you can go from hero to villain. Let's hope that doesn't happen. Let's hope we can still put the respect on. I wonder if David Moyes can turn things around come the end of the season. Join us later on for the Hammers headlines. Alex will be on for the TikTok takeover. Make sure you do join him at 9 o'clock. He'll be going into more depth about the David Moyes situation. It's a very interactive show as well. But there you go. Whispers coming out of the club that maybe it's Moyes versus Steiden. Again, we don't know. There's no facts behind what I'm saying. It's just coming out from reputable people, close to sources, close to the club. Usually 9 times out of 10, that comes from the top man, David Sullivan. Very frustrating times. Let the battle commence. Is there any truth? Who will know? If you're liking it, the content, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment, and of course, come on, you wonderful